Hello everybody, my name is Caitlin and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things horror and horror related. And today I'm going to be talking about the new Ti West film, X. I'm going to be keeping this non-spoilers for the first half, but I will be talking about spoilers, specifically the ending in the second half of the video, but I will give you a warning before that happens. X takes place in the late 1970s and follows a group of wannabe porn filmmakers. They get together one day and decide to make a porn film, and they all have different reasons for wanting to get into this industry. They all want to get into the industry because they feel like it'll either make them famous or bring them a lot of money or help kickstart their filmmaking career. And so this group all gets together one day and they go out into this small town in the middle of nowhere in Texas. They rent out a guest house from an older couple and they spend the day and night making their pornography film. And as all this is going on in the background, you have this older couple, it's a husband and wife, and you can just tell from the beginning that something is off with them. They're not quite right. From the start, this older couple gives very similar creepy vibes that the older couple in Ti West's previous film, House of the Devil, gave, where you can just tell that there's something off here. There's something not right, but you're not quite sure what it is yet. And as the night goes on, things start to get crazier and you slowly realize what's really going on with this couple. And I guarantee you it's probably not what you think when you first encounter these characters. This film is wild. I wasn't really sure what to expect going into it. I had seen a few of the trailers here and there, but I went in mostly blind. All I really knew was that it took place in the 70s and that it involved porn stars. I loved this film so much. I feel like it's the mainstream horror film I've been waiting for years. And I'll just say off the bat, I'm a huge Ti West fan. I really enjoy his previous films, especially House of the Devil. For me, Ti West is one of the few filmmakers that can actually make you feel like you're watching a film from the 70s or 80s. I remember watching House of the Devil for the first time and feeling like I had found a lost film from the 80s because the look of it, the feel of it, just everything about it matched that period and matched the aesthetic and the tone of films that came from that era. And he does the same thing with X. It definitely has that late 70s gritty indie film feel to it. And it's more than the aesthetic or the vintage look. Like, he really knows how to recreate the atmosphere of films from that period. We've had so many horror film and TV shows in the last few years that want to ride off the coattails of nostalgia and have stories that take place in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And while those can be a lot of fun, what always disappoints me is that these properties never actually feel like something from the 70s, 80s, or 90s. The most they go is dropping in like pop culture references, or they'll do, needle drops and just play really popular songs from that time. Just an example that comes off the top of my head is the Netflix Fear Street series that they did last summer that was supposed to take place in the 90s and 70s. And those films relied heavily on using music from that era to try to make you feel like you were back there. But they didn't recreate the look or the feel of films from that period. And so that's what I love about Ti West, is that he actually recreates the atmosphere and the feel of films from that era. Like, again, just going back to the Netflix Fear Street for an example, those films all feel very modern. Despite taking place in the 90s or 70s, they feel like films that were made in 2021. Whereas with X, Ti West is utilizing camera angles and movement that you would see from 1970s films. You can tell that he studied films from the eras that he's working in and does such a great job of just, again, recreating that feel. It's such craftsmanship. So Ti West's filmmaker goals, for me, I just love his work and I really appreciate his craftsmanship. And he can just pull off what a lot of other filmmakers can't do. I know this has been said on social media like 1,000 times already, but it really is true that the look and feel of this film is what the new Netflix Texas Chainsaw Massacre should have been. And you can tell that this film borrows heavily from Texas Chainsaw Massacre in terms of its look. It also borrows from other films such as Psycho and The Shining. Going into the film, I had no idea that it took place in Texas. Again, I just knew that it was in the 70s and that it had porn stars in it. So when the film opened, immediately I was like, yeah, we're in Texas. The film didn't even need to tell me that. I just got it from the look because, again, it is borrowing from Texas Chainsaw. It is borrowing from other films of that period. It just had the similar look of a Texas Chainsaw. And it's not obnoxious like some films where it's like, look, we're making a reference to this older film that you all like. Aren't we clever? It's not that. It feels very natural within the story. And it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, if you recognize it, then you'll get it. But if you know, you know. But again, it doesn't detract from the story or what's happening. In addition to the look and feel of the film, I really loved a lot of the themes that X is exploring. There are the obvious themes of old versus young throughout the film, but it also goes deeper than that. There is also a lot of themes around this idea of like the grass always being greener on the other side, like always wanting the thing that you don't have, that you can't have. A lot of these characters are operating within this idea of, well, if I just had X, Y, and Z, then I would be happy. If I just had this, then I would be famous. I would have money. I would be able to live the life that I want. Or you have characters that are like, well, if I could just go back in time, if I could just be young again and do things over, then I would have this and I would have that and my life would be so much better. So Ty West is playing with this very human trait of wanting something that you can't have or wanting something that feels just slightly out of reach, and the very desperate things that people will resort to in order to try to get that thing that they want. And the film really plays with this idea of moral ambiguity and where is the line between when someone is moral and when they're being quote-unquote sinful. For example, you have this group of young people who are very hedonistic and all about wanting to have sex and make money, and you would look at them and by, you know, society or religious standards, you might say that they're immoral. However, they have little moments here or there where they try to help someone else in their group or they try to help the old couple. And so they're definitely not bad people. You can maybe question their motives or their judgments on certain things. But again, it's really interesting how the film plays with this idea of morality and what is moral, what is not. So I really loved a lot of the themes that this film was playing with, and it definitely has you questioning your own thoughts and judgments as a viewer. There are so many ways that Ty West could have gone with this film. Usually when we have films or TV shows that's about porn or the porn industry, they tend to be very sleazy. They like to play up the sleaze factor, having, you know, the fat, gross male producer, having the young starlet, all of these elements. And you don't get that with X. The people involved in the making of this film all feel like real people. They all have real motives for why they want to make a porn film. It really is showing how these characters are empowering themselves by making this video, which feels very refreshing and something that we don't usually see in film and TV. I really loved the cast of women in this film. Mia Goth, Brittany Snow, Jenny Ortega, they all knocked it out of the park. And I loved that we had a film that featured a group of women who were not afraid to express their sexuality, who knew what they wanted and were not afraid to say what they wanted, and who were not made to feel bad by their male counterparts for having desires or for wanting to be sexual. For me, they all felt like very empowered characters, and I would love to see more characters like this in horror films and just films in general. And can I just say how nice it is to have a mainstream horror film in theaters that's not afraid of showing sex and nudity? I don't know what's been going on, but it just feels like the past couple of years mainstream horror has felt kind of prudish. Not that you need sex and nudity to make a successful film. Case in point, Ty West's previous film, House of the Devil, didn't have any of those elements. But there is something to be said about the relationship between sex and death in the horror film. Horror is a genre that plays on our primal fears, and so it makes sense that it would incorporate elements of death and sexuality. And having nudity and sex can make scenes feel more vulnerable, which can heighten the tension. So I appreciated that we have a film here that's not afraid of going to those places, as well as pushing the boundaries in terms of our expectations when we think of representations of sex on screen. For those of you that like gore, there's plenty of it here. This is very much a traditional slasher film. So if you're into that, you will definitely love X. I think that's it as far as the non-spoilers go. I'm gonna get into the spoilers and the ending here in a minute. But overall, I loved this film. If you're a fan of horror films, you're gonna love this. It has all of the elements that you're looking for. I will say, like many Ty West films, this is a slow burn. It's gonna take you a while before things start ramping up. I think the first kill didn't happen until maybe middle, end of second act, beginning of third act. So you are gonna have a lot of time with the characters, but trust me, the wait is worth it. All right, I'm getting into spoilers now, so if you haven't seen the film, stop watching here. Throughout the film, you realize there's something up with the wife of the old man. It starts off with her just watching them from the distance. Her husband comes in and tells the group of amateur porn filmmakers, like, hey, don't be going around strutting around and tempting my wife, you know, try to be decent, be discreet. And at first it's just like, yeah, he doesn't want them disturbing her or offending her in any way. But then you have Mia Goth's character. She ends up going up to the house, meeting with the wife, and the wife invites her inside for some lemonade. And it should also be noted that Mia Goth is playing both of these characters, which, to be honest, I had no idea she was playing these two characters. I knew that the old woman wasn't actually an old woman. You could tell that she had prosthetics and makeup on, but I had no idea that it was Mia Goth playing two characters. She is amazing in this film. And so as these two characters are talking, the old woman starts getting creepy, a little bit handsy, starts feeling up Mia Goth's younger character. You find out that the old woman used to be a young dancer. She had all these dreams for herself. And then the First World War and then the Second World War happened, and her husband had to go off and fight in the wars, and the life that she had dreamed for herself just fell apart. And so she's a character that craves youth. She wants to be young again. She wants to have the experiences and feelings that come with being young. She wants the body of a young person. She wants to experience the sensations of having a body of a young person. And she's a very repressed character. She's someone that has sexual desires and needs, but her husband doesn't fulfill those for her. He's always going around saying things like, well, I can't have sex with you because my heart is bad and it's going to give out. So she's a very repressed character, and it's this repression that causes her to go off and start killing these young people. She watches them doing the things that she wants to be doing. She's very jealous of a lot of the younger women that she doesn't look like they do anymore. And so again, playing with this theme of wanting something that you can't have anymore. And it's all this rage and anger and repression that just boils over, and she begins knocking off these characters one by one. And so I love the way that this film is flipping the classic slasher trope, right? Because usually when we see slasher films, usually we have the final girl, which in many times is a repressed character, or she's a character that we just don't see acting out in terms of sexuality, in terms of partying, drugs, all of that, like other characters in slasher films usually do. And it's usually the characters that are very sexually open that are the ones that get killed, and the final girl, which is on the more repressed side, is the one that survives. It's this idea that Carol Clover talks about in her book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws, that because the final girl is repressed and she has all this pent up sexual energy and anger, that's what pushes her to be able to survive the film. That's what gives her the strength to be able to kill the bad guy in the end. Whereas here with this film, repression is the killer. It's the thing that bubbles over and causes all of this chaos. And so I really appreciated that Ty West was subverting the typical slasher final girl trope. And I also appreciated that he wasn't afraid of showing older people wanting sex and engaging in sex as well. Seeing older couples engaging in sex or being sexual is just not something that we see in films. And in horror films specifically, when you do have an older character that is expressing some sort of carnal desire, it's seen as erratic, it's seen as something that we should be frightened of, that we should be grossed out by, when that really shouldn't be the case, right? In reality, older people have sex. It's a part of life. It shouldn't be something that's demonized or pushed to the side and pretend doesn't happen. And so I thought it was very brave of Ty West to have this element in here. And to me, while the old couple are the antagonists and they are the one committing the killings, I didn't feel like their sex scene was meant to be something that was like scary or gross. In some ways you feel empathy for these characters, right? Because this is a woman who had big dreams and then those dreams got destroyed and she feels like she never got to live the life that she wanted. How many of us can relate to that, especially as we get older? So again, this film just feels really fresh in terms of what it's exploring and what it's willing to show on screen and the boundaries that it's pushing, while also still keeping the typical slasher film formula that we're all used to and that we all love. If I had one complaint about the film, and it's not really that big of a complaint and it's kind of my only one, but I would have liked if the death of certain characters had been maybe a bigger moment or had been a bit more intimate. Just a personal thing for me, I don't like it when people use guns in slasher films or when they use them effectively, such as killing off the bad guy and stopping him or killing off a character. I think one of the things that's so effective about slasher films is the intimacy. That intimacy between the monster and the victim and just the close proximity that they need to have in order for the killer to get the victim. And also the intimacy that comes with plunging the knife into a body or plunging the weapon into a body, right? Again, if you've read any psychoanalytic film theory, any horror film theory, you'll know that a lot of film theorists tend to equate stabbing with sex. And there is that intimacy there. And there's something about that that again heightens the vulnerability and just makes it feel more icky and scary. And so in this film, you have a couple character deaths where it's just the old guy has a shotgun and he just goes around and shoots at some of the characters and that's it, they're dead. I would have liked if those moments had just been a little bit bigger and again, more intimate. There's that great scene towards the end of the second act when one of the characters, the filmmaker, he gets in his car and he wants to leave and he stops when he sees the old woman standing outside and he goes outside and she starts rubbing herself up his body. And then when he pushes her away, she just stabs him in the neck. And then from there you have the scene where she's straddling him and she's just stabbing him continuously. And again, it feels very fitting for a film that is about sexuality and is about repression. Her stabbing him in the scene has a very sexual feel for it. You can tell she's getting gratification from this act. So I guess I would have liked if the other deaths in the film had been that way as well. Again, some of them just felt very quick. But other than that, I really have nothing else bad to say about this film. I thought it was great and I highly recommend everyone go check it out. So that's my review of X. One more thing I'll say, if you've seen this film and you stayed after the credits to see the end credit scene, because yes, there is a scene after the credits, I'm curious, what did you think of it? I feel like I'm still mulling it over in my head in terms of what it was meant to be. It definitely had the feel of a cheesy 1970s grindhouse type trailer, but it also gave hints to the older couple, specifically the older woman and who she was when she was younger. And so I'm curious what others found in that trailer or just generally what they think about it. And let me know what you thought of the film overall. Did you like it? Did you not? What parts did you like about it? Let me know in the comments down below and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.